Hello, hello, Uplevelers. Christie Mann here.
And Rachel Baldi.
This is our final episode in our first season of 2024, leading through crisis, chaos, and change.
Yes. Wow. Are we already 3 months into the year?
We're already 3 months into the year. And this, from my perspective, was, I think, our best season yet. And what I mean by that is most aligned to the work that we're doing in the world about upleveling humanity and really helping people bridge the mundane and the spirit, and how you bring that into business, how you bring that into your well-being, your relationships, and the lineup. I thought was pretty sweet, the lineup of guests.
Yeah. I loved as well that we're really trying to bring so many different voices. And also, I can't believe there's anyone who's not dealing with change, chaos, or crisis in their life. And so hopefully there's something for everyone here.
Yeah. And in our conversation today, so if you're listening to this, you might have picked up a couple episodes and heard them already. Maybe you haven't listened to any. So what we're hoping is you get a little something that inspires you to go back and listen to another episode or a new one. And we also want you to walk away with kind of a call to action from Rachel and I. We do this at the end of each season. The things we learned that we think will support you to lead through these times, lead through crisis, chaos, and change. And we've been defining I keep saying this, but if you are a human, you are leading. If you are leading, you are human. So it's not in the traditional context of leadership. We're talking about being human through crisis, chaos, and change, because this is the planet we live on.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. I remember when I was first said, a leader, I'd say to myself, well, I'm not a leader. I'm not yet up in the corporate world as a leader. And it doesn't mean that. It means you're a leader of your own life. You're a leader of your family. You may be a leader of your community. We're all leaders, and therefore we're all responsible for our world.
You know it. So let's honor the guests that joined us, because these leaders hit it out of the park. So we want to thank Sunday Phillips,
Neil Edwards,
Annabelle Viscara,
Margot Fawkes and Shay Marvel,
Jeff Jacobson,
Shabapreet Khalsa,
Lisa Gorin,
Yaraben Shayam,
Donna Bond,
Brian Kramer,
and our final guest was Karen Kimsey House. So thank you to each of you for coming and bringing your specific medicine for these times. There were practical tools, there was guidance and contexts that we knew each of these individuals could help add to this discussion. So here's some of those highlights and takeaways and call to actions.
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest themes that came off on so many of the episodes was the importance of us building practices and then leaning into practices in times of chaos, change, and crisis. And what we mean by practices are routines, structures, things that you do or be in order to support your well-being, to support your health, and to support your nervous system. And so for some people, that's working out. Some people, it's breath work. For some people, it's praying and religious practices. Others, it's embodiment and moving, being in nature. All of these techniques and tools that we use as leaders to come back to come back to our oneness of ourselves. What is the,
come back to our center. Find that center, that gravity point. Yeah, well said, Rach. And specific practices were shared through Annabelle Viscara's episode around womb healing and divine feminine leadership. Sunday Phillips, it was a beautiful conversation, and she is a embodiment and somatic teacher and and also brought in the astrology forecast for 2024, which was really cool. But she brought in centering practices, like Rachel was saying, to help us find that core. And then Shabapreet Kassal, who's a Kundalini yoga teacher, practitioner, brought in one of mine and Rachel's favorites, the breath of fire, to help really, like Rachel said, ground the nervous system. So we want you to start to think about your practices.
Yeah. And we want to hit full disclosure. Typically for lots of people, and I'm one of these people, is when I'm going through crisis, chaos, or change, I drop my practices. That's the first thing that I don't make time for because I'm dealing with it. And I know, and that's why it's so important that these practices, because they are actually going to help me with going through the crisis, chaos, and change. And so it's about knowing what practices are helpful to you, what help to bring you back to center. And then remembering, which I've managed to do now, but it's taken many, many years, that that's not the thing that should get dropped first. There's other things that should get dropped. And that actually is the thing that I need to hold on to.
Thanks for that vulnerability, Rach. And it's true for me too. Yeah. You know, when things are accelerated and there's high levels of stress, my coping mechanism is to do more, work harder, and not sit with the discomfort, which a lot of these practices that we're exploring this season are about actually observing, sitting with, including, integrating the discomfort, right? And how do we grow? How do we like, in order to grow, we must include the discomfort, the crisis, the chaos, and change, because we are seeing it at an accelerated rate. So the guidance was, beyond just here's some nice tools. It was a context was set in each of these conversations. And Donna Bond's episode around awakening your original wisdom, she goes into the 4 intelligences in that conversation that can help give you even more awareness and insight into your individual system, so that Rachel's saying you're finding practices that are meaningful to you, because there's not one size fits all comes to this. Also, what I've learned is they shift through time. Like I used to do 90 minutes of Kundalini every morning. I don't do that right now. It doesn't work with my energy levels, what else is happening in my world. So knowing that sometimes we've got to iterate our practices, throw things out, try something new. But we want you to have one thing that gives you a connection that's outside of yourself, that's bigger than you, so that you can tap into that field and know that you're not alone.
And if you're someone listening and thinking, I don't know what my one thing is, then go off and try some different things, which is what I did until I found what my one or few things are. And if you do know what your one thing is, then stick to it. Do it even more. Honor it.
Honor it. Yeah. Okay, so another theme, which was really fun to explore these discussions of cultivating more intimacy into me, I see, and cultivating more kindness. So there were 2 distinct conversations that brought these into play.
Yeah. I'm thinking of the conversation with Neil Edwards. And I mean, what a beautiful storyteller he is as well, in just how he tells the story or paints the picture and the context, and then gives us the wisdom or the tools. I found that, and how he has been very open about how he has kind of gone about that in his own life and his own journey. Yeah,
it was beautiful. And I think he'd be okay if we shared with our listeners that we got a lovely note from him. Other people, obviously, when they're on this podcast, they share it with their communities, and someone had listened to it and then shared it with the CEO of their company. They're bringing him in to do work. And that's one of the big things Rachel and I want. Whoever comes to talk to us, we hope that they get more opportunities to serve in their unique way. And I loved the language that Neil used around this, that part of the solution could be profound intimacy. And I know I've had to reflect a lot because in the past, that word for me has meant like something like sexual or intimate with maybe my partner, not so much the way he spoke about it, which is really about creating intimacy with yourself and therefore with your team or with others, your community. And Rachel, gosh, is there a deficit, right? This is something that's so lacking is real depth and intimacy. So listen to that one because it's just going to make you think.
Yeah. It's going to make you think. And exactly that he started with himself, right? Into me, I see. And that's where it began. And from there, that then opened up where he could be more open and vulnerable and intimate with others. So, which isn't the way I would have gone about it, but I see the wisdom in it now.
Lots of wisdom.
Story. Yeah.
Jeff Jacobson, who is another one of our colleagues, he's one of our mentors. And to know Jeff is to love Jeff. So if you haven't listened to the episode, just do yourself a favor. And it was one of the most downloaded episodes because Jeff is the king of kindness. And this was the topic. How can cultivating more kindness help us lead through crisis, chaos, and change? And he's broken it down into 5 buckets. And in the episode, he gives you more context, talks about personal stories. And what are those 5 buckets, Rach?
I think clarity, sweetness, honesty, play or creativity, and vulnerability. Interesting. Like that really amazed me that vulnerability is a form of kindness or a bucket of kindness. And again, he is listening to that episode, you just want to go out and be more kind. Like he pumps up and with yourself as well. I think that was the other thing, not just with others.
And what was really important, I know to him, but I think to you and I too, Rachel, is that it's not about being a doormat. It's not about being nicey nice. And this was something that we really emphasized, and he's emphasizing in this body of work that kindness is clarity, can be fierce directness, but without vulnerability. Like I'm noticing I need to tell you something and I feel really afraid to say it. Like that's the vulnerable piece versus just saying the thing and then not being aware of that it could hurt another.
Yeah.
Or I'm afraid it's going to hurt you if I share this thing, but I need to share it with you because if not, it's going to come out in another way at another time in a way that will not help anyone.
Yeah.
The play piece I find really important because I think, Rach, you and I could both attest we're working with a lot of leaders right now and a lot of people, and you and I have been having these discussions ourselves, feeling a level of fatigue. 4 years now, it's like at the 4-year anniversary we're at when the pandemic kicked off. And then there's been this accelerated pace of crisis, chaos, and change. And people are just so fatigued. And where you are living in the world, if you have the privilege and the resource to play, this was a big thing that came out of that conversation with Jeff, that play is kind because it will rejuvenate us in ways that we can be more present to other people, listen more deeply, bring more to the different missions and people and communities and families that we serve.
Yeah. Yeah. And that how play is a lot of the times, children do it so beautifully. That's the way that they connect with each other is through play. And we kind of unlearn that as adults. But it's actually like a very quick way to be closer with another person or more intimate with another person and connect with another person, especially someone who's from a completely different life that you're living. Or it's the thing that can connect us. And that it made me think about, and I know me and you, how much play do we have in our lives and how much time do we give to play?
We need to up that dial. Well, Rachel and I got to physically be together about a month ago. And in between the work we were doing, we were being playful with each other and just having these moments of like, oh gosh, for me, I was like, I just love you. Like you are just one of my best friends in the world. I just love you as a human. And it was so nice because it enriches the work. Then the doing
doesn't feel so hard.
It doesn't feel so hard because it's like I'm playing. I'm with my friend doing cool shit, hopefully helping people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So more play in all environments. Rach, I want to take us to the conversation we had with Yara Benjamin. Courage amidst conflict, navigating perspectives and paradoxes during times of crisis, chaos, and change.
Yeah.
So this conversation with Yara felt really important to me. I had been observing people over the past while and how folks are navigating these times. Yara lives in Israel, so I was observing her over after October 7th, and I really wanted her to contribute to this theme because her context is obviously unique to her. And I was also aware that a lot of our guests are from North America, which we have this level of privilege. We have this level of resources, right? So when we're talking about things like play and centering techniques, like it's all lovely, but
we have them available to us that not everyone has.
That's right. That's right. So this was an interesting one too for you and I to navigate as business partners. And you want to say a little bit about what happened for you when I said I'd like to bring Yara on to have this discussion?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to be transparent that I definitely went to a concerned place. A concerned place around what are we actually talking about, or what is the purpose of this? And it took me and Christie having some conversations and meaning that what is the purpose of this? I wanted to make sure that we were not trying in any way to be who we are not, meaning we are experts in leadership development. We're experts in up-leveling consciousness, or that's what we want to bring to the world. And there are other experts as far as the conflicts that are going on around our world. And I wanted to make sure that we were not trying to be something that we weren't. And so, and I also we both wanted to, and this is something that we always want, is to represent many voices. And so my concern was that we were going to have one voice and not a voice, not the other voice on the podcast. And so we had some conversations, right? We had to talk it out. I was definitely very in a place of worry and not wanting to, like I said, take on a different, I don't know how to say it, but I was worried.
Yeah.
And concerned. And so we spoke through it. We had several conversations, even down to me having time to just process. Christie made sure that I listened to the podcast before we released it. And that was definitely a really big point. We actually listened to it together.
Yeah, that was good.
So that I could hear the conversation. I could make comments to her and just talk things through as the conversation was played to me. And we came to a good place, that the conversation wasn't doing what I was concerned it was doing. It was letting Yara have a voice and speak about her experience. And that's 100%. I want that. And I want that for everyone. Yeah. What do you remember about that? Because
I think the reason why we're talking about this on the podcast is because we want to let people in from what happens behind the scenes, because anybody co-leading anything, you're going to come up against, you're going to have uncomfortable conversations. You're going to have to lead through crisis, chaos, and change together. And this was a great opportunity for Rachel and I to deepen into our intimacy, like what we were just talking about, and be vulnerable with each other about perspectives, beliefs, values of current events.
Yeah.
And then it was also an opportunity for us as business leaders to get very clear on our stake. That's some coactive language for folks who aren't coactive. And what that means is it's like, well, what is it's beyond the purpose, beyond the intention of this particular season. Like, what are we trying to achieve? And Rachel said it beautifully. We are trying to achieve getting out stories, voices, contexts, tools, techniques, that will serve humanity during these times. So all voices, all humans are welcome, because their context, their voice, their story, whatever in their friggin' toolkit, it's helping them navigate this time. So we have something to learn from it.
And it may help others, right?
And that's what we're trying to do.
Exactly. And that's what the whole purpose of this is how can we get as many different voices, as many different tools, as many different things out to the world in service, completely in service, knowing that some are going to serve you and some are not going to serve some listeners, right?
Right.
And others are going to serve those. And that's what we're trying to have as well, is a large level of diversity so that there's something for everyone.
Exactly. And given that, we did want to speak to somebody in Palestine or in Gaza, but obviously we can't, given context.
We tried.
We did
try, and we will continue to try. But the reality of the situation, the dark reality of the situation, is that we haven't been able to find someone because they're dealing with their own real life experience right now. And being on a podcast is not a good use of their time.
Yeah, it's not a privilege that they can use. So like Rachel said, we'll continue to, in all the seasons, look for the diverse stories and voices from different places so that everyone's being represented. So that's like the behind the scenes with that conversation. But there was such wisdom from Yara, and that's why we wanted her on. She is being fiercely courageous and authentic in her journey right now. And she always has been. We've known her from the past, but obviously, given the context that she's living in, she really had a lot to share. And one of the key takeaways for me was silence, the power of silence. Just that moment of silence felt so nourishing. Like, yeah. I got to just remind myself all the time that silence is our tool to navigate crisis, chaos, and change.
Yep, absolutely. And being silent, it was someone that mentioned this to me not long ago, and I was like, wow, I never noticed that listen and silent have the same letters.
Actually, Yara says that in this episode. Yeah. Yes.
But because you can't listen. And I'm talking about, you can't even listen to the other person, but let alone you can't listen to yourself. So just taking that time for silence, you get to hear what is going on for me, as well as listening to others, obviously.
Yeah.
And I did love that Yara brought in a theme. We both loved it, right? That she brought in this theme around shutting up, around how shutting up actually can be a good thing sometimes. And that we, especially if we're living very privileged lives, like we spoke about, where we have access to everything, talking about someone else's lived experience, sometimes it's just best to shut up and listen.
Yeah. I really appreciated her telling me that. I'm still on my soapbox. I haven't given this up about humanity growing their capacity to hold the complexity, to have multiple perspectives. But Yara was like, that is a privileged kind of North American thing to say. There's other places in the world right now where people don't have that luxury. So there are different ways you can find different perspectives, when you're in like a crisis zone or a crisis moment. That is something she taught us too, which I really appreciated. But I also, in that conversation, I modeled, like, it was very genuine. I was like, but I'm confused because I'm being told to speak up. I'm being told to take a stand, take a side, and if I don't, this is what this means, right? If I don't choose that, then I'm this. If I choose this, then I'm that. And then yet you're telling me to be quiet.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying I have the answer for that. That episode just showed how complex the times are and how it is hard to know how to show up and how to serve. And Yara, from her context, right? she says this is from her perspective. Maybe if you're not in the situation, you're not in the crisis, can you step back and just observe, be in silence, educate yourself, but don't be so fast to throw your opinion in and jump in. So that resonated with me.
I thought it was a beautiful conversation between you two, even just your vulnerability, and like you could literally see how you were struggling.
So confused.
You could hear it, in wait a second, wait, don't speak, say something, don't say something, wait a second. And then what should I do? How do I help? And I think that is so relevant. And there's so many people who are asking, how can I help? How can I help? And
sometimes silence is the way that you can help.
Yeah.
Or it's like with one person versus a full population, like for us being in relationship with our colleagues who are in these crisis zones right now, some of them have communicated to us that it's important to them. It helps them feel seen, to know that they're not alone, right? Because being in survival mode, our brains get active in reactivity, internal dialogue. So, and that this is leading me to think about another theme in this season was the matriarchal energy, feminine energy, the divine feminine, the mother archetype. This came through in many of the conversations, like all of them hint to this.
Had it a little bit.
Yeah. It's deep in Annabella Viscara's, because that's actually the work that she does. And it comes across in Donna Bond's Awakening Your Wisdom. And then, of course, Karen Kimsey House, who is one of the founders of the Coactive Training Institute and the methodology that Rachel and I teach and represent inside organizations. And she's like the matriarch within our coactive community. So we really wanted to hear from her. But there's so much that I think is important about all of us. It doesn't matter what gender you are. You have masculine energy, you have feminine energy, and things are out of balance right now, within ourselves, within the collective. And in those conversations, we were learning from leaders who are actively cultivating their feminine leadership.
I'm curious around what did you take away or do as a call to action based on that? Like, what have you put into practice or thought more deeply about?
Well, one of the things I did think deeply about, because it came up in the conversation with Annabelle, is do you remember when back in the day, when we were youngins, you, me, and Tina, and when we were headed up CTI's internal corporate department, so we'd have our Monday check-in meetings as a team, and we'd talk about where we were in our cycle, our moon cycle, our menstrual cycle. And we'd really be intentional about, okay, these are the types of tasks that I'll be doing this week. Like if someone was ovulating, it's like, okay, great, you're going to be on a sales call because you have the energy to be outward focusing and close a deal. You're like ready to rock.
Yep.
And if one of us was menstruating, it's like, okay, you're behind the scenes and you're going to be checking boxes and doing the filings and making sure everything's organized,
or even sitting with a question that needs some deep wisdom, because we knew that time.
Thank you for that.
That time was about accessing that inner wisdom, and so it was like, okay, maybe having you focus on this big question that we're trying to work on.
That's right.
Yeah.
That was such a powerful time, And my big hope for all humans, again, it doesn't matter what gender you identify, because we all have cycles. We have individual cycles within our bodies. And then we talked about the business cycles, which, let's be honest, folks, the old ways are dying. They're not working anymore.
They don't work anymore.
Clearly, right? And so that was one of the themes that came through. And this is the feminine energy piece, because the feminine is going to ask, like, okay, well, it doesn't feel or sound, or I don't sense this is working anymore. So what's the new thing that's wanting to emerge, to be birthed? And it's like, the feminine energy will much more be present to what is and flow and dance and move within it. And I think that was a theme. And obviously things like empathy, compassion, nurture, that we need to give it to ourselves so we can give it to our teams. We can give it to our clients. We can give it to our communities, our loved ones. That all came through in those conversations. It was really a relevant theme for me.
Yeah. And so, I know we're kind of saying the same thing again, but, we work with many leaders in different organizations, right? And with just the same thing we hear from everyone, like burnout. I'm trying to lead a team of people, and I'm having my own experience, as well as trying to be there for my team in their experience. And like we're saying, the old way of just kind of push through, keep going. Yeah. It's just not working, because it just leads to burnout. It's not working. People are really suffering.
Yeah.
And then they can't show up for their teams. So what if you tried a different way? And the feminine leadership way is more about, like you said, nurture ourselves so that we can nurture others.
Yeah.
Compassion, empathy, all of those things. So, and it's not about women that it's not about the gender.
It's not. Because we all have feminine and masculine energy in us, right? It's just about we are out of balance as a collective. So how can we bring more awareness in our individual selves, and then even within our team construct, or if you're running an organization collectively? It's like Rachel and I know we're both deeply in our masculine. We are really good at getting shit done, and we're both working on evolving from that and letting ourselves receive more, and still doing, because that's the nature we live in. But how can we do from a more balanced and resourced place? Yeah. And that's the feminine, that's the matriarchal wisdom. So that's a takeaway. It's more of an inquiry for you. If you're listening to this and you're grokking it, again, doesn't matter what gender you are, how can you balance the feminine and masculine in you and bring more awareness to that in your day-to-day?
And you're talking to two females who are very strong, as Christie said, in the masculine energy, getting things done, achieving, moving,
Yeah, we love our results. We love our P&L. We love ROI. I mean, and none of that's going to go, because it's just
it's not balanced.
It's not balanced, and we're looking to up-level the way we operate, not just in our business, but in our relationships, in our communities, right? Yeah. With our children.
Because there's a cost. That's the thing. There's a cost.
And it's not sustainable. So if we're talking about leading through crisis, chaos, and change, you got to put your oxygen mask on first. It's cliche and it's true.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's talk about grief in the workplace, because you interviewed two incredible humans, and grief is another thing that's very prevalent right now.
I could talk to these two women for hours and hours. So the conversation, we touched on many things. I would love to continue, but it was really a lovely for me, on my purpose and the work that I do in the world, to get to have a conversation with two people who are doing similar work around how to navigate grief in the workplace, and how does grief impact the workplace? How does grief impact leaders and leadership? And grief actually touches on everything that we've just spoken about, and I just love that it goes back to, again, there was so many things that they spoke about around empathy, compassion, around being in touch with your own grief, and how do you navigate your own grief? And people who are able to do that and model that, leaders that are able to do that, are therefore able to show up for others in the same way and hold space for others as they will navigate their own grief. And we're not talking about just grief of death, right? That happens, but there is just so much grief that happens. Losses of jobs, not getting a promotion, that happen in the workplace, moving teams. I mean, right now there's so many organizations we're working with where there's redundancies being made layoffs being made, massive layoffs. And so there's grief for the person that's being laid off, absolutely. But there's also grief for the people that get to stay. Yeah. And how as a manager are you holding your team in that experience?
One of our mentors said, good leadership is grief management. Good leadership is grief management. And in the context of leading through these times, grief is everywhere because of all the examples Rachel just provided. And every time there is a crisis on the world stage, a conflict on the world stage, or in our backyard stage, in our community, in our countries, there's grief because there is some community of human that is impacted. And then they come to work. And part of the system that's dying is stepping over that. Like, oh,
let's just carry on with our day.
Right.
Okay. Where's the project moving in this?
And this is something Rachel and I are really invested in. It's why we bring coach training into organizations, because basically coach training it's human skills, it's relational skills. It's how do I be in better relationship? And this is what organizations are realizing. And they're choosing to make this investment because people need that support now more so than ever. And it's not going to shift. We're only going to increase our capacity to hold crisis, chaos, and change because we are building a new world, people.
Yeah. And most people, let's be honest, most people are scared to talk about grief, right?
Yes.
Most people are scared to go there, or they don't know how to. That's the thing I hear the most with the people, or when we're working with people, is like, well, I don't know how to approach that conversation. I want to be sensitive. I do want to help. I want to be there, but I don't know how. And again, it goes back to you can learn. There are skills. It's about teaching skills around how to be in relationship and how to manage grief in the workplace, what to say and what not to say. That it can be taught. It can be learned.
It can be taught. Reach out to us.
Yeah.
Look at and listen to that episode. Check out Margot and Shay's work. It's beautiful work. This is really relevant work. And, Rachel and I we are committed to doing more of it inside our organizational clients and in the world, because it is life. Grief is life. Life is grief.
Yeah. And we know from the stories, I mean, some of the most amazing stories I've heard from people around why they stayed with a manager or why they stayed with an organization. But some of these stories I've heard is that, the CEO showed up to my husband's funeral. I know, or I was asked about how I'm feeling around my pet dying. Like, they sound simple and so simple and small, but they're not. They're huge.
They're huge.
And it's those things that make people stay and be committed and engaged in their work, because they know the people around them care.
Amen, sister. More, please. More of that.
Yeah.
Well, we also really loved and appreciated the practicality of the episode with Lisa Gorin and the episode with Brian Kramer. So Brian's episode was titled The Human Competitive Advantage for Leading Through Crisis, Chaos, and Change. And in it, he talks about 3 steps to trust. And they're super accessible. He breaks it down with stories. It's really clear. But you get to hear why being human during these times is your competitive advantage.
I love that, because it sounds like, oh, of course we're human, but a lot of the time we don't act human. Like, as humans, we have free will. As humans, we have the ability to be empathetic. We have the ability to have compassion. Like, we have things that other species don't have.
Amen.
But we don't use it sometimes. We don't use those things.
We don't. And I love, that's why I said it was so practical, because he's like, your biggest advantage is to be human. It's to be real. It's to be authentic. Like, in a world filled of automation, right? Like, plunk in the person's name, send out the email. How can you make it more personal? More like your true voice. And that goes back to when we're talking about from Yara's conversation, like the silence and the slowing down, or even the embodiment techniques that Sunday taught us and Annabelle and Shabaprit taught us, like, slow down, tap into your truth, your authenticity, your humanity before you hit send on that communication.
And I'll be transparent. I've been working on this, right? I've had feedback in the past. You're laughing, but
I love it because we use it everywhere, right? Because it's been a real.
It's been real that I can be a little bit too transactional. When I go into work mode, I'm like, okay, let's get things done.
Get her done.
Yeah, and that's a great, that's a good quality of mine, right?
Yes.
And sometimes the impact is that I forget the relationship piece because I'm moving too fast. Like you said, I'm trying to get through stuff and I go straight to transaction. And I've been working on the relationship, like you said, slowing down. How can this email be more relational? How can I know this human and I actually know things about this human and I want to check in on them and I care about this person? Yeah. Or even if I don't know this human, I'm curious about this human. Who are they?
Yeah.
What do they like to do? And so it takes you slowing down and then tapping into curiosity or compassion.
Yeah.
And then just voicing that. And it does have impact, right?
It does. And it takes a little bit more time, but what we know from honoring our humanity is that it saves us time in the long run. So it takes a little bit more time,
ROI.
Right? Good ROI. We get that back in there. So yeah, the other thing I want to mention from Brian's episode was I was really appreciative. He was very vulnerable and he talked about, I think I asked him who's a leader that's been most impactful on him. And he disclosed that he's 2 years sober. And he spoke about his sponsor through AA.
Yeah.
And first of all, just wanted to acknowledge the vulnerability of that because he had never disclosed it really outside of his close community. So it's public now. And we just appreciate when people come and bring their authentic human selves.
Yeah.
And then we talked about how we all have addictions, like Rachel and I have an addiction to doing and working. I have another addiction to like overthinking. Like that's an addiction. So addiction just isn't substances. It can be like to doom scrolling, like social media. It's basically anything we do to numb out from sitting with the discomfort, so from sitting with the feelings that are coming up through crisis, chaos, and change. So we didn't go deep into it, but we touched on it. And I'd love to talk to people more about this, Rach, is like, what does it mean to lead a sober life? And again, we've been very conditioned in our culture that it means like no alcohol. I'm talking about like, gosh, just like all of the things that we do, we say to stop us from feeling our humanity. Like, what would it be like to be that sober that we put all of those things down, all of those mechanisms?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you say that because we had a conversation earlier today. I'm currently 1 week into Ramadan, fasting from the majority of the day, from Fajr, from prayer, early morning prayer until Maghrib prayer, sundown. And my body is going through a detox of vices, the things that I am addicted to, and meaning tea.
Tea and toast. Good British.
Carbs, exactly.
Uh-huh.
Those are the things. But also it's forcing me, during Ramadan, it's not just about fasting from food and water, drink and food, but we fast from what we put inside our eyes, what we allow to come into our knowledge. It's on so many different levels. And it's uncomfortable. I mean, I can notice just the first week of sitting, I don't have those things that I could normally go to numb or to take my mind away from what I'm experiencing. And so instead, I'm having to sit with that. And I know that there's because I've done this many times before, there's a beauty in that, but it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And it's actually forcing me to go and have more conversations with God. For me, with Allah. For others, it's going to your center, to your oneness, you know. But it's not until I put those things down and sit in the uncomfortableness that then I can hear my own thoughts and go to those deeper places within myself and heal those. Yeah.
It's I've had the privilege of witnessing you over the past, is it 9 years? This is our 9th year together. In this time, in this season, and it's beautiful to witness, you know, because you are truly putting down the vices so you can be with what is, and it's tough. It is tough. And so,
especially now with what's going on in the world, right? Like even more than ever.
Yes, even more than ever, because the way for many of us getting through these times is through our vices. And again, it doesn't, like we said, it's not about alcohol. Like there's just so many things that we're doing to not feel. And we know that like part of what I'm walking away, like what I'm knowing from this season is growing our ability to be with the complexity, to be with the tension, to be with the polarities. This came back up big in the Karen Kimsey House interview conversation. And I think the way to do is what you're modeling and what you do in your faith. It's fasting from the things that are keeping us away from being with what is.
Yeah. Yeah. And allowing yourself, I was listening to a podcast of Gabor Mate.
Yeah.
I was talking about allowing ourselves to be heartbroken.
Amen. There's so much to be heartbroken about.
Yeah.
And we know too, there's so much to be joyful about, right?
Absolutely.
So that's the polarity, and we get to, right? You mentioned how humans are the only creature on the earth that has this like complete honor to experience just heartbreaking, painstaking, grueling grief. And then on the other hand,
joy, ecstasy,
bliss, pleasure. Like we are so lucky.
Yeah.
You know? So we're going to start to wrap this up, but we hope you're getting as excited as Rachel and I are about recapping all these wonderful humans that came to speak with us. And we hope that there's something in one of the conversations that really resonates. The last conversation, it wasn't the last in order, but the last one we want to mention is with Lisa Gorin. And very practical in that Lisa is a business leader within the healthcare system in the US. So talk about navigating crisis, chaos, and change. So I loved the practicality that she brought to the conversation. And she talks about the individual like mental health and well-being initiatives that organizations launched early 2020. No bueno. Let's up-level the production, people. And she spoke very humbly. She's such a humble human, but also with pride about the way she's systematically approaching well-being and mental health for her people. That it's no longer enough to have individual interventions like, hey, team leaders, you get this amount of money allotted towards people's mental health. It's like it is part of your strategy. It is built in from the top. It is built into every aspect of your business and operation. So, I mean, thank you, Lisa, for modeling that and that practicality of this is how we need to be leading through crisis, chaos, and change on a systematic level. It can be done. It's not easy.
But it can be done. And I think that's what she highlights. So if you're a leader, if you're responsible for an organization, you're a leader that's like, and you're saying, I want to be able to do that. Go and listen to that episode because she gives real practical ways to be able to do that.
She does. And I know she'd be available for conversations. The other thing I want to mention about that conversation was I asked a lot of the guests, and you did too, Rach, about a person who they feel like has been a model for them to lead through these times. And Lisa spoke about her mother. And as she was describing these qualities, and these are all qualities that we've been mentioning, that helps a leader be effective through crisis, chaos, and change. But as she spoke about her mother, I was like, well, that's just Lisa in a nutshell. So, the apple didn't fall far from the tree.
Yeah.
But here's what happened. Lisa's mom passed away 3 days before we launched that episode. 3 days before. And her mom had been living with basically chronic MS for years, which was actually the instigation that got Lisa involved in healthcare. So we got to hear that whole heroine's journey, like that whole story, and then about how her mother has these qualities that she defines as a strong leader. And then the news right before we're going to launch it. So of course we reached out to her, like, does this feel appropriate to share? We will honor that this episode is in your mother's name. And she was like, oh, my mom would love, that this is coming out right now. And Lisa was so generous, and she was grateful that we were able to capture the impact her mother had on her. So I'm just sharing that because it feels like what's really important right now as we navigate these times is to reflect on the people who have had significant impact on us.
Yes.
What are the qualities, and then how can we cultivate more of that in ourselves?
Yeah.
And then if these people are with us, or even if they're not with us, can we acknowledge them? Can we take some time out to let them know, hey, you have impacted me in a way? Because we just never know. We just never know.
The legacy lives on, right? In the sense that if the quality is relived, then that person's legacy is still living, even though their body has died and they have died and their body has died, but the legacy lives on. And that can actually be passed on generationally. And
or from a team lead, to team folks that they work with, right? Because that same kind of transfer of wisdom and skills happens. But just acknowledge your people, let them know. Rach, what are your final words in leading through crisis, chaos, and change?
I think it's just going back to that. We really just hope that there's something for everyone in these episodes, that these episodes help you feel more resourced in your lives, in your days, that you're not alone as well, that maybe you're here in one person's story, you can see yourselves in them, and that gives you hope. That's really, for me and for what we want to do in UpLevel. And the point of our podcast is, like we said, spotlighting amazing human beings and the work and the work, not just the work they're being and they're doing in the world.
Yeah.
And then sharing it.
Yes.
So that's my hope, wish.
Thank you.
Humanity. Yeah.
Thanks for doing this with me, Rachie. Thanks for co-creating. And mine's the same. I hope it serves. And please give us feedback. We want to know what is serving you, what really worked, and what other themes are you wanting us series so that we can produce a lineup of brilliant humans. Maybe you are one of those brilliant humans, and you know that coming to the UpLevel podcast is a place where you're supposed to come to spread your mission and your purpose. So reach out to us. And if you are an avid listener, let us know, because sometimes, you're doing these things in a void, and it's great to get feedback.
We like feedback.
We like feedback, and constructive feedback too. When something's not working, give us that feedback, and like the episode, subscribe to it, all the things that they always say about podcasts. It is our intention to grow this. So we want you to grow with us. So thanks for contributing in that way.
And share it with someone who maybe isn't inside our community and doesn't know about it, if you feel like it would be helpful.
That would be awesome. So we appreciate you. Thank you for learning,
loving,
and upleveling with us. We'll see you in our next season, the
Yeah.
ROI of coaching in the workplace. Boop,
Yep.
boop, boop, boop.
ROI, baby.
We're going back on the ROI, because we
Yeah.
went we got to go back to it.
Yeah.
In and out. All right. Lots of love.
Thanks, listeners.